On this episode, U.S. House candidate Matthew Diemer of Ohio joins me as my guest. The saga of Trump and his documents continues. And of course, we have to take a trip to Florida. All this and more today on The Open Highway.
The Open Highway with Eric Erickson.
And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I am your host, Eric Erickson, and welcome to The Open Highway. As always, it's a pleasure to have you here. We have a very, very special episode today. My guest is U.S. House candidate Matthew Diemer of the 7th District in Ohio. He joins me, and we are going to talk all things political and the election that the entire country is going to be watching coming up this November. It's been a very busy week, so let's just jump into it because it's time for the news. So where should we start? Well, apparently the Trump Document Saga continues.
But we begin with what is really stunning new information on what the FBI says it found at former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home more than 18 months after he left office.
We're going to begin with the breaking news overnight. The new information on what the FBI says it found at former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home more than 18 months after he left office.
We have new revelations from the FBI search at Donald Trump's Florida estate. Now, this is a picture showing top secret documents agents seized at Mar-a-Lago earlier this month.
So if you've been paying attention, legal briefs have been filed. They're heading to the courts, and they are requesting things be unsealed. Some are being redacted. It's just a whole thing. But hey, that's the court system. But more information comes out a little bit every day, and something that was just revealed is that the Department of Justice explained that some of the material collected at Mar-a-Lago when they went in to get it was so sensitive that it required investigators to seek additional security clearances before they were able to review it. The agents sent in weren't even cleared to deal with the stuff that was apparently laying on the floor, if you've seen some of the photos. And reports are that the former president was upset that it was on his very expensive carpet. But, you know, we don't know. You never know what's going on with some of these things. But something else has come out in the last few days.
Former President Donald Trump has allegedly spent years bragging to his closest associates that he has some salacious dirt on Emmanuel Macron.
Rolling Stone has come out with an article a little bit more specific. So one of the items that was recovered was marked as item 1A, info regarding President of France. So there are a few people kind of wondering what this might be, but Rolling Stone has come up with a theory. Apparently, over the years, the former president has bragged to his associates, pretty much anybody who wants to listen, that he knew a lot about the love life of French President Macron. And he even claimed he learned about some of this through intelligence that he'd seen or been briefed on. Well, it's not clear whether the document that was recovered is this information about the French president's personal life, or if it's information that he was talking about when he mentioned the intelligence collection. This gets into some very interesting areas because, as I said, Trump has talked a lot about, he's been quoted saying he knows about the naughty ways and things that not very many people know about the French president. They were close at one point, and then it started to erupt, and Trump even had a relationship, professional relationship, and supported one of Macron's rivals, and it just went back and forth. But a source is quoted in the article as saying, you know, and this is a quote, sometimes it's hard to tell if he's bullshitting or not. So you can't even tell what this guy's saying, what Trump is coming out and saying. So Rolling Stone is trying to work on this, and they're trying to put connect the dots. And the issue is at the crux of this, not only whether or not he has his own Steele dossier on the French president, but back in 2014, under the Obama administration, a directive was put out, PPD 28. Well, this directive forbade eavesdropping on the leadership of, quote, close friends and allies after some things happened with Angela Merkel. And in 2017, when the Trump administration reviewed it, they decided they would abide by this order. So if there was information that was brought in, now it only matters if they are going after it. If it's picked up on the side, like, and purely hypothetical, if the French president was having an affair with a spy and the U.S. Intelligence operations were charting the spy and happened to pick up Macron, then that's legal. But they can't go directly after him. So this is starting to come up, and people are starting to wonder. You have to look at this about where did the information come from? Has Trump been dangling this out there for a while? I really think you're going to hear more about this. But it just keeps coming back to Trump, and now he is still claiming that he declassified all of this. He declassified all of these documents. That's his right to do it, which leads me to, yeah, I don't know about that. That's right. The segment's back. Yeah, I don't know about that. Because here's the fact of the matter, and this is just the way things work. So I'm going to take a moment to explain some of these terms that we're all hearing, and sometimes you don't know what they are. Basically, there are 3 levels of these documents. Confidential is the lowest rung. This is information that could cause, quote, identifiable damage to national security if released. The next level above that is secret information, which could also cause serious damage to national security, but more of it. And then the top level is top secret, that is quoted as saying exceptionally grave damage to national security. So those are the 3 levels. So SCI, which you may have heard of, is an abbreviation for sensitive compartmented information. So this has to do with, like, if you go back to like the Manhattan Project, they didn't sit around going, I know everything about how to create an atomic bomb. One department worked on something, another department worked on something else. They compartmentalize it. Someone doesn't have all the information. So that's when it comes, that's what it means when you hear the word compartmented or compartmentalized. Now, a lot of these documents can only be discussed in what's called a SCIF. You may have heard that term going around a lot the last couple of weeks, especially from senators and congresspeople. That's a sensitive compartmented information's facility. It's basically just a secure room that you go in, you can read the information, it has to stay there, you can't bring in your cell phone, and that's allowed for people with the correct security clearance. So Trump keeps saying that he declassified all of this stuff. And we're going to hear a lot more about that because it's a weird situation because yes, a president can declassify documents with just a verbal instruction, but that verbal instruction then has to be memorialized in a written memo, drafted by counsel. He then has to sign it. Then the agencies are consulted to give their own opinion on whether or not it should be declassified. Now, the president can tell them all to go take a flying leap and override any objections, but it still has to be memorialized and the documents have to be changed. So once the decision is made, once he signs the paperwork, the documents in question have to be marked. They have to be stamped declassified on this date by the agency that's connected to it, and then it is technically declassified. So if the president is sitting in the Oval Office and is looking at the Area 51 reports, he can't just say, I am going to declassify these, send them to the media in the next room. There's an entire process that has to go through. He still can override the judgment of the department, but it has to be memorialized. So when he keeps saying, I've declassified these things, that's not how it works. It's not done on a whim. Now, here's a little interesting part of it that I want you to consider, and something that is definitely going to come up. Presidents can give security clearances to anyone that they want. They can go over the head of people. They can say, I want them to be able to see this. And it's a little bit murky on how that works. If you remember, in 2018, Trump ordered Jared Kushner to be granted top secret clearance, even despite concerns from intelligence officials. So it's a very, like I said, it's a very murky area, and we probably are going to hear more about that. What's crazy is Mark Zaid, he's a national security lawyer. He actually came forward with the theory that Trump, if he wanted to, could give security clearance to Vladimir Putin, and it's legal. He could give it to the leader of another country and show them whatever he wanted. So these are the security things that are going to be coming out. So like I said, I don't think so. So before we start falling into that rabbit hole, if he can wave this magic wand, there are legal things that have to be done. There is precedence. It just doesn't work that way. Sorry, former President Trump. You don't have all the power that you think you do. But again, we're going to hear a lot about this in the coming days. Did you get your student loan debt forgiven? You all excited? Hey, congratulations. But you might want to hold off on celebrating because you might not be quite off the hook yet. So millions of federal student loan borrowers are in the process of seeing $20,000 of their debt wiped away. I've seen friends of mine who are celebrating. They've gotten letters. They've gotten all this. It's great. But here's the problem. It's tax-free on a federal level, but if you live in certain states, you may still be on the hook for your taxes. Mississippi has come out and said they are planning to tax residents for given student loan debt as income. There are other states who have come out and said exactly the opposite, such as New York, Virginia, Pennsylvania. They have all introduced tax exemptions for their residents, so you're going to be okay if you live in those states. But if you're in Mississippi, don't start counting your chickens because you're going to have to pay taxes on that. Other states, including Arkansas and Wisconsin, are looking into it. Arkansas, their Department of Finance and Administration came out and told the press that they are reviewing actively whether debt forgiveness is in this scenario or whether they are going to charge state income tax in the state. They're all still trying to figure it out. Wisconsin is addressing it as part of its budget. So don't go too far. Don't start spending all that money that you think that you now have because you don't have to pay, because you may find coming next April there's a bill. Oh.
Florida is situated in the south of the United States.
Great state of Florida.
In Florida.
People of Florida.
Florida man.
Florida.
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 Florida. Florida. Florida.
Florida. Florida.
It's Florida.
Yeah, it's time for Florida. So, Paul Turovsky, he's a 34-year-old businessman from Fort Myers. Well, apparently he got married. Well, that's not too crazy of a Florida thing. He got married. He and his bride were in Tampa. They were on their honeymoon, and his new bride fell asleep. So Turovsky was looking for something to do, and he turned to the internet. And then this happened.
Tonight, a man who investigators say was here on his honeymoon is now among more than 100 people arrested in a prostitution sting in Hillsborough County. 176 arrests in all. You can see him there. The sheriff said that they posted these fake ads for sex at a hotel, and the response, he said, was overwhelming.
That's right. So he apparently found an online ad and decided that on his wedding night or his honeymoon, he needed a prostitute. So he went out and he got busted. So I guess the silver lining is many of these guys who got busted were out looking for underage prostitute, and at least Paul, hey, at least he was looking for an adult. I guess that's something. So Chad Chronister, the Hillsborough County Sheriff, had a really interesting point. He's quoted as saying, "The only question here was, as a wedding guest, was it too late to get the gifts that they gave returned back to them?" That's a really good question. What is the Emily's rules for getting your gifts back when the groom gets arrested for soliciting a prostitute. Is this a Dear Abby thing? Do we need to write in and ask what the, or Reddit's Am I the Asshole? Is this kind of where we need to get an answer for this? I don't know. So he should have just maybe watched a movie. You gotta wonder, but you know what? It must be Florida.
It's Florida.
Today's episode is sponsored by Home of the Top 10 Lists. This fun website is not only entertaining, but informative with lists of cool products from all over the internet. From camping to coffee addiction to even Bigfoot and aliens. To celebrate their sponsorship of this episode of The Open Highway, they've even got some special political lists up right now. The link is in the show notes, so check them out at homeofthetop10lists.com. My guest today is Matthew Diemer. He is a candidate for the U.S. House seat in Ohio's 7th District. He is coming off a primary win and heading into the general election this November against Republican Max Miller in what is expected to be a hard-fought race under the watchful eyes of the entire nation. Here's Matthew Diemer. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about, God, there's so much. I have so many notes. It's this whole concept we're dealing with right now of redistricting. We just saw what happened in New York, with Nadler and Maloney and that whole thing. And this is something that you're quite familiar with because you wouldn't be running for office if it hadn't been for redistricting. I mean, you may have run for office, but it's definitely set up an interesting situation. How's it affecting you?
Well, look, redistricting and gerrymandering, if you will, affects a lot of people differently. I definitely would have been running for office, gerrymandered or not. Actually, I started this campaign about 16, 17 months ago, and we went through 3 or 4 different districts through that time. And every time I made the commitment, where my house is drawn, I'm going to run because I committed to running for office. Now, I don't know who I would have been running against in some of those different moves of the district, but I knew that who the Republican opponents possibly could be. And so we're just, staying the course, and we're still continuing the campaign. Looking at your question though, about, you're talking about 2 Democrats being put together to primary each other. And that happened over here in our state race. We have a person who was, there's 2 incumbents. Mm-hmm. There was a person named Monique Smith and a person named Bride Sweeney. And both their districts had got drawn in a way that kind of pitted them together against each other. And at the end of the primary, we lost one good Democrat and one good incumbent to go to the state house. And so, it was totally by design. We have illegal maps over here. The 4-year maps for the state houses, state districts are going to be redistricted in 4 years. The courts are said that my maps right now for the federal congressional districts are illegal, and they'll be looked at again in 2 years. And so, but they're still letting this go on. So, and then there's no checks and balances by, the legislature of saying, oh, we're going to keep making illegal maps, and there's no enforcement from the judicial. So it's like, it's this weird kind of place that we're at right now.
Yeah, it's the ultimate version of, hey, everything's messed up, but we got to keep moving forward. You
Right.
definitely have to you got a campaign to run. That doesn't change that. So I was looking at the platform that you have, and they're very standard, Democratic planks in your platform. But one that I wanted to ask you about is education, because right now in Ohio, you're facing the strike with the teachers, and it's not about pay, it's about conditions, right? It's what's going on there in Ohio. And I know it's in Columbus, which isn't your district you're running for, but I mean, you're from Columbus, right?
I'm from the Cleveland area.
Cleveland. I'm so sorry. See, one again, the reporter right there. My editor would have just slapped me on the back of the head. But,
no worries.
But
we're all Ohioans at the end of the day. So
there you go. So So what's going on there, and how do you view education on a level in the state versus a federal level, and the connection? What role does the federal government play? I mean, what role does the state play? How do you see this playing out?
Well, look, you hit the nail on the head. They're striking in Columbus, and I know this is hard on students, and I get that argument too. Like, oh, they just did COVID. We're starting to get back to normal, and everybody's getting back to the flow, and there's a strike that absolutely is stressing out parents. That's stressing out kids, and I have to acknowledge that.
Mm.
But the teachers are striking, like you said, for conditions. I mean, they're saying like we need proper heating and air conditioning in classrooms. That is not absurd, considering that there's money coming into the state from different ways because of stimulus bills and so on and so forth. So the state is holding on money, but if they're not improving public education, then I think that is something that we really have to look at. And I'm really happy that the teachers are standing up for their students in this way of having good facilities to educate, and safe facilities. I personally think, you asked like that on a federal level. Look, the education in schools are a state level issue, and I'm good friends with one of the people on the Board of Education here, and we talk quite a bit about different policies, and they're really working hard to make sure that they're enacting good policies and so on and so forth. Besides the gerrymandering of all of those districts as well in the Board of Education. But I think for the federal government, I think that we have to have a bigger outlook of what we want education to be and how that really fits into our goals for the future. We can't keep looking at this as a 2, 4, or 6 year problem, depending on what race you're trying to run. We need to look at what education is for America for 20, 40, 60 years. And what we did see is we see the gutting of very essential trades and skill sets and so on and so forth, because during the 80s and 90s, going to college was the biggest and best thing. It's the only way to get ahead in the world. And now we're looking for truck drivers, we're looking for teachers, we're looking for electricians and carpenters and all kinds of these skilled professionals. Mm-hmm. And we're looking, and I don't know if I mentioned police officers, but we have done two things that I think the federal government has to take the narrative for. The first one is making sure that we put dignity back in those jobs, basically make the trades sexy again, and like lift those up, and do that with a big national campaign saying, you can be this. You don't have to get a 4-year degree and get $100,000 in debt. You can be, and there's apprentice programs and work with vocational schools. And I know they're doing that on a local level, but from a federal level, this is a level of, I think, skilled labor shortage that we have to address across every state. And the other one is just put the dignity back in those works. Like teachers have been demonized for political purposes. Police officers have been demonized because of George Floyd and different other things, but also perpetuated in political purposes. And so those are two professions that people have looked at and go, do I really want to be a teacher right now? Do I really want to be a police officer right now? And I respect the hell out of teachers and police officers, and we need them. And so I think from a federal level, we just really have to start leading with with putting respect and dignity back in those jobs and promoting that there are other alternatives than 4-year degrees.
So how do you do that? Because that's not the first time I've heard that exact statement. Not this, put the sexy back, to quote Timberlake, but I mean, I've talked to several people and they go, well, if you go to another country, if you go to Germany or you go to another country, a trade school is seen as pretty much the same level as going to a 4-year college, because it's important. It's part of the workforce. Here, it isn't considered part of the American dream. How do you bring that back? How do you tell someone, a union job is a great job. You've got good rates, good healthcare, good, it's okay.
And that's the thing. I think we call it propaganda. I want to call it marketing, but marketing on a national level, market it. Mm-hmm. Tell people what this means. I mean, I really think that when people are thinking about what I have to do, and it's still in the older generation, the Gen Xers, that, their kids have to go to college. I mean, I'm going to be very disappointed if my kid doesn't go to, the Ohio State, and just starts an apprenticeship and becomes an electrician. But I think that it is a sort of a big, national marketing thing to say, hey, we need this in our society. These jobs are important. And also they pay really damn well and we respect the hell out of you. And that's what I think we have to market. And I that's the only way I think we are able to do that, because the wages are there. They're just talking about getting 7,000 contractors over in outside of Columbus for the new Intel plant. And they're saying that those jobs are going to go up to maybe $125,000, $150,000 a year for those construction jobs. And so it's like, look, you're going to make good money, and you're going to have a skill that's going to transfer not only from that job to other jobs, from state to state. Like, I just think it's a national marketing issue.
Well, how do you look at, so we have COVID, we're hopefully coming out of this, or depends on who you talk to, but that revealed such issues with the supply chain, with what we really make here, what we have to get from other countries. So what you're saying is those types of jobs, there's an opening for that, because aren't we now talking about, like, look, things should be made here. We shouldn't have to rely on another country if we need surgical masks or if we need computer chips or whatever it is. How do you bring those jobs back? How do you foster that creativity in this country in order to make America a place where we do make things again?
Again, I think that's just long-term thinking of the government. This has to be a plan that is, that is stuck to and adhered to. And I don't know if it's Joe Biden that makes it. I don't know if it's the Congress that makes it. I don't know if it's the Senate that proposes it. I don't know. And I don't know in what kind of departments they rope into it. If it's the Department of Defense, if it's the Department of Education, and so on and so forth. But look, China's had a long-term goal of becoming, becoming the manufacturing hub of the world, becoming independent in a way when it comes to fiscally, when it comes to being unified, Hong Kong, Taiwan, they're going to try to get Taiwan. And so with all of this structured progress within China, this is how they're really gaining on, America when it comes to the supply chain and economy and building their middle class up and people buying houses and cars and living out now the new Chinese dream. We just have to, really get organized and say, look, if we're going to compete and we're going to actually move ourselves into the late 21st into the 22nd century, we need to have a plan that everybody says that we will agree to do this. Politics and politics aside, there has to be a national idea of where we're going. And that brings all of these jobs together. That brings our supply chain on shore. That brings us into a technological and a infrastructure future that is bleeding edge, to help capitalize off of these new technologies that are coming out. That's investing in R&D. And when we talk about just investing in infrastructure, we're not just talking about making sure there's no potholes, but we're talking about new kinds of transportation. We're talking about new kinds of communication. We're talking about encouraging people to build and make and support that here, and not abroad or somewhere else. So I think it's just a bigger consensus that we need to come to. And I don't know if it's a policy or if it's a sit down, it's of a think tank or what have you, but we're not going to do it by just arguing about, I don't know, little things that don't really matter to the long-term big picture, just for political purposes.
Yeah. And that's something you brought up in your platform, is unity. That's something that you've addressed a number of times. So how do we get to that point? How do we get, and I'll here's the elephant in the room. I mean, your opponent, Max Miller, isn't exactly a unification candidate. I mean, his whole platform is divide and conquer. Let's be honest about that. Trump-backed former White House aide. I mean, we can go on, but unity is such a broad concept. So how do we get that? How do you find that in the current political landscape, or with the people that you're talking to?
Personally, I just think it's electing the right people. Look, if somebody's talking about unity, you have to ask them how they're going to do that. And but first, the first thing is you have to be talking about it. You have to be sincere about it. We base this campaign off of that idea ever since the beginning. Even when we're getting pushback and saying that, oh, that's not going to win, that's not the winning way to look at it, that's not the winning platform, we always said unite, not divide. Because I think that's the biggest thing that's plaguing America right now. When I I lived abroad for a while, and I would call my mom, and I was abroad when Trump was elected, and she's like, America is more divided than it ever has been. And I was like, Ma, you're just watching too much, this channel or that channel. And then I got to, back to the States and back to Northeast Ohio. I was like, damn, she's right. And so, but people still wanted to be in their camps. People still wanted to take the extreme this way and the extreme that way, and not listen to these other sides and actually understand the concerns that they had or they have. And so first you have to find the people and elect the people that are actually talking about unity. And then it's like, how are we going to do that? Well, the only way I can do that, the only way that I know I can do that, is to make sure that I'm listening to all sides. The first thing I'm going to do when I get elected is I'm going to call every Republican party and group within my district. And I'm going to say, if you guys are having a meeting, I'm going to come down and I'm going to talk to your people. And I know I'm going to get slaughtered in there. I know it. I've actually sat down with lots of Republicans through this whole time. We've actually had sit down groups with, a dozen or so people just to hear out the other sides. I told them that's what I want to do. I will go down and I'll sit down and talk to them. And I want to have them part of the discussion. I'll say straight up, you might not have voted for me. You might not even like me. But the thing is, we have to talk so I can take what you think, what you say, your needs to Washington to legislate for this district, get money to this district for those purposes. And so we have to break down the politics of this. And all it is, honestly, I think of these two political parties as Ford and Chevy. Like, you look at a Ford truck, you say it's rubbish. The guy with a Ford truck looks at a Chevy truck, says it's rubbish. But there is this silent majority that's in the middle, and just because we have the brand of a D and the brand of an R, or a blue or a red, or a donkey or an elephant, which is absolutely ridiculous, we all of a sudden stop conversation. It is not right. It's not the way to move forward. I'm going to be a candidate that is 100% going to sit down with all sides once I get elected to make sure we are advocating for the entire of the seventh. And the last part of this, I know I'm going a little bit long, and I always, I don't want to go too long on one answer, but that is part of the problem with Congress right now. And they have a 16% approval rating. And I truly believe I'm not going to move the needle of the approval rating of Congress, but I will move the needle of the approval rating of my job. And that's because once you are a Democrat candidate, you only listen to Democrats. Right. And a Republican, only listen to your base, the Republicans. And so therefore, automatically, a little less than half are upset. So you only have a 50.1% approval rating. Well, if that's enough to keep your job, then fine. But if this was a business, if this was Amazon, I can guarantee you right now, no CEO is going to keep his job, or no, HR person is going to keep her job or his job if they have a 50.1 approval rating.
Well, what about the independents? Like, I know. So you've got your red and you've got your blue, and then there's people in the middle who have just basically said, I give up. Like, everybody's the same. No one's listening to me. Half of them don't go vote. Some of them vote sometimes. It's this disillusioned middle. Like, how do you reach out to them and show them that the system isn't broken? Because many of them think that it is.
Well, I think that's where I said the silent majority. And it's just about talking to people. A lot of people, like, first of all, I don't identify as a Democrat. I identify as an independent Democrat. I'm a Democrat because of the social issues. And I could easily be a moderate Republican. And that's the truth. But the reason why I think a lot of people identify as an independent is because they're sick of all the bickering on both sides. And they have to take all of the bad with the parts that they like in a certain party to be that party. When we all know that there's a huge swath of gray or purple or whatever in the middle, that sometimes even a Democrat might be a little bit Republican and a Republican might be a little bit Democrat in these different ways, but we just get boxed in. And I think that's what an independent is. There is nothing speaking to them. And I think a unifier that is in office, that's willing to sit down and talk, that is the person who's going to have that good customer service, that be that good representative in Washington, and you're going to get that 80, 90% to make sure that we're advocating for the majority.
Is that your day one then? That's like literally after you get your office and figure out where the filing cabinet goes and your fight gets planned.
Measure the curtains first.
Measure the curtains. But that's the reach across the aisle. That's the Biden kind of, that's kind of the Biden mantra when he first got into office is, reach across the aisle. I know how to make it work.
I don't know what that's going to look like in Washington. What I'm talking about, what it's going to look like on the ground here. And so Washington is its own beast, right? I don't know what that's going to look like in Washington, because everybody's playing their own political agendas. Might not even want to be caught eating a ham sandwich with me in the lunchroom. I don't know. I haven't been there. I have grown up in Ohio, and I do know Ohioans, and I do know that it's never been this way. I do know that the corner bars were filled with different ideologies, and would all go out to the bar after work, have a couple beers, talk whatever stuff we wanted to talk about. And then even if we argued, which was actually sometimes kind of fun, we would go home, forget about it, come back the next day, and we all were working for the same goal.
Yeah, but you're going to sit there arguing over the beer. You're going to argue, Budweiser or Miller, which one? There's always people like to fight. People like to draw that line. We do, but it's different. Are you going home with a bunch of baggage, hating the person at the end of the day? Or are you going back tomorrow and having a beer again with them? That's the problem. That's a totally different thing. You nailed the problem. You nailed the problem is people go home with the baggage. We can't leave the baggage at the bar. There's your tagline. You can't leave the baggage at the bar.
You have to leave the baggage at the bar. And I think that's what we have to do. So for Ohio, I know we can do that. For Ohio's 7th, I know that we can do that. For Washington, that's another beast. I'll tackle that when I get there. But I can 100% assure you, I'm going to have conversations with you. We don't have to agree, but I'm going to hear you. I'm going to meet you where you are, and we're going to leave the baggage at the bar, and I'll come back and have another beer with you the next day and talk about more stuff.
There you go. That's the whole problem. It's policy over politics. Is being able to sit down and figure out the problems.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, there's one issue that I did want to ask you about is this ongoing issue with the unionizing of Amazon and Starbucks and those types of companies and how we're handling that. Where do you stand on that? Where do you feel the negotiation should head? I mean, it's a tough one.
It's not a tough one. It's absolutely not. It's not
okay.
A tough one.
Hit me.
No, you unionize. Look, here's the thing. I personally think that labor is sometimes left out of the free market. We just think of labor and jobs as a wage. And so if people are accepting a wage, then therefore that's the free market, right? But what we're not leaving out of the free market is the discussion and the organization of labor, the free organization of labor and the free mobilization of said labor. And so you can't be an Amazon and think that it's a free market to negotiate your prices all over the world to get certain products or certain whatever, and then bring that in there, and that's what you call a free market, without having labor able to negotiate as well, and negotiate their work environment, their terms of work, their pay, and so on and so forth. And that's just absolutely part of it. And especially if you see companies bigger like Amazon and Starbucks and so on and so forth, I think that workers need to have a buy-in in that. They do see record profits in the billions of dollars, and the workers know this. They go, "Hey, this is on our backs, and are we actually getting what we think that we're worth for this to continue this great experience that that this company has built up?" We are the person that experiences that. So I am 100% for that. And then with that negotiation and free market, just like you would if it was contracting a certain supply of something or, whatever, then you'll figure out the great fit for the market. Now people are just going to say, "Oh, but my coffee is going to go from $3 to $4. Look, if that person out behind there is getting a good wage and a pension and we're turning these things into careers and they're doing a hell of a job for the company, go for it. I'll pay $4 for a cup of coffee. If not, I'll make it at home."
What do you think about the heavy-handed tactics? What do you think? Should they be punished? I mean, should they be brought into the court of public opinion for that? I mean, some of these union breaking tactics, we're hearing stories about. There's stories about Amazon actually like interfering with the mail in the South when one of them was voting. You have Starbucks firing people on trumped up charges because they tried to unionize. How do you level that out so people can vote if that's what they want?
I personally feel that, well, first of all, I think that it's wrong. Again, that's not the free market. It's not the free market to try to stop your employees, the people who work for the company, from talking and discussing and figuring things out and understanding that there's pay discrepancies, or this whole bathroom thing is kind of weird. I only get like 2 minutes to go to the bathroom. If I'm not, I'm docked pay or something. They like this whole like checking in and looking at my movements via GPS. I don't know what the conditions are like in Amazon. I don't work there. However, if you're not able to discuss like your employment with other employees, and figure out if everything is not only fair, but if we can make it better. And the employer is trying to stop that conversation, that is an issue.
Mhm.
That is an absolute issue.
Let's talk about you for a second. You're fascinating. I think because something that you're bringing to the table is, you had mentioned earlier that you studied, you worked in China and Taiwan. You have other experiences. So walk me through that a little bit. Tell me a little bit about you. Like, what's the background that you bring to this?
In what aspect? We could go from
Well,
for
okay,
days, man. I
so
don't want to ramble too long.
raised in Cleveland, I got it right
Yes,
this
sir.
time.
Yep.
Raised in Cleveland, and then you went to college, but then you moved overseas, and you worked in China and Taiwan, correct? What was the jobs that you did over there, and what did you learn that, especially about this? We already discussed this relationship with China and the business aspects and global economy. So, what did you learn there? What were your experiences that you bring to the race?
Let's see. Let's just take it back then. Let's take
Okay.
it back to before I talk about going to the University of Hawaii and graduating political science. I'll say that I got a full scholarship to study my MBA in Taiwan. I got a full scholarship to study Chinese in China, and so I was in Beijing for 6 years, trying to work on Chinese Mandarin Chinese fluency.
Yeah.
But before that, I was a high school dropout. So I dropped out, 16 years old, wanted to go straight to work, and I worked as a dishwasher and a cook, and it's like if you're working in the hospitality industry and you're working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. I remember being an 18-year-old kid, 19-year-old kid on a salary, but still pushing, because I was a salary, 90-hour weeks. It came out to what, $4 or $5 an hour sometimes, some weeks. And you know what? I loved the job. I loved the hard work. I lived in urban areas. I lived in rural areas, So I think, and then of course I lived abroad. And when I was abroad, I was not only studying, but also I went back into the hospitality industry and was in a different level, an executive level. So I was an assistant GM, a GM, operations director, a COO, and had to manage 200 people with millions of dollars a year revenue, and we had to just take people from 48 different countries and different cultures and language, and like just make sure that they're achieving mutual goals. And so I think that what I bring to the table is an experience that a lot of people don't have because of the growing up poor, but then becoming middle class, working like 90 hours a week in the restaurant industry, burning myself all the time, plus then being a manager as well, and trying to. My life was always about negotiating. My life was always in negotiation, even in my family, in my communities, plus in work. It was always about a negotiation, and so I think that's what I bring to the table, is somebody who has empathy for many different people, because I have lived in those different spots. I've been financially secure. I also was homeless in Beijing. I was, so it's just having those different experiences. And then with those different experiences, I feel that even though it's not all the experiences that are going to be represented in Ohio 7th, it's easier for me to put myself in specific experiences and meet people where they are, so I could take that message to Washington.
What do you need? So we keep talking about Ohio, and we keep talking about how you can serve Ohioans being in Congress. Part of that is bringing work back, creating jobs, creating industry and industrial opportunities. That's part of what you want to do. Part of that is losing those to other countries. That's something we've been fighting now. I mean, decades is something that's going on. So what is it that needs to come back? What are the jobs? What are the ideas? What is that part of your platform? Like, are we competing against China? Are we trying? Is it indeed, as some people have put it up, is it a commerce war? Is it a situation where we have to take that attitude, or are we trying to work with them? What do you think, based on your experiences and based on where we are now?
That is a very interesting question.
Because some people, the reason I ask is some people have this like, and I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that your opponent probably kind of has this attitude where it's like, no, man, this is the front line. We're in a war, tariffs and this and that. And it's like, well, there's more than one way to go after it.
Look, I think that there's two ways to look at it. I'm sorry. There's two different aspects to this, and I think that they are both right. And but one way, let's say my opponent, the way he looks at it is not incorrect, but it's also dangerous. To say that we are in a war, and he says we have to, I think his line is fight against China or beat China and not compete against China, right? That turns it into an adversarial thing. Look, the role of a government is to lift up its people, protect its people, right? Do everything they can to make sure that their country is growing in a way that is serving the people. And there is nothing wrong with a country coming into, which China did, is lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. They made some amazing cities, great infrastructure, and they've created an amazing economy, right? This is exactly what a government is supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right. Now we could talk about the freedoms and all that other stuff, which is not inherent into the Chinese constitution like it is here. So we definitely have a cultural rift there. But the Chinese government is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So to say that we have to fight against them is fighting against what they're supposed to do for their people. That's not the case. So I want to make sure that we're taking that rhetoric out and say that we have to compete. Second is that we are innately better equipped to compete against China and succeed than anywhere else in the world. Not just our size, not just our geographic location, but our diversity, the way that we are American, immigration, getting the best talent from around the world, and allowing them to tackle problems here, right? That's one of our biggest strengths. The ability to become an American and get the same rights, equal rights as everybody else is almost inherently American. That you can't get a lot of people in a place in the world. For that person to be an immigrant, to start a business and go with that idea and innovation to create great businesses. That is almost inherently American. You're not going to get that in China. And that is the diversity, that is the innovation, that is the power of America that people really need to see, that that's what makes us special. And so we will outcompete them if we start saying we will outcompete them, putting our, like I said, long-term goals to create these different and new emerging industries. Now, look, when I say bringing back supply chains, we do have to make a lot of stuff here. There is stuff that we are going to always make abroad because it doesn't make sense to pull them back here. And hopefully we do that with free trade partners or partners that we can rely on, Canada, the UK, so on and so forth, and not relying on, say, China for these different things. But there are emerging techs and also high-tech items, computer chips, some biotech, new emerging AI, 5G technologies, space travel, so on and so forth, the electrification of transportation, different kind of energy sources. These are the things that we need to make sure that we are focusing on and bringing in some great talent and encouraging American talent to develop that. We're not going to lose to anybody in the world because of innately who we are. We just have to make sure that we're focused on that.
Well, for too long, economic development meant bringing a call center to your district, not your specific district, but a lot of places it was like, we're going to bring jobs. Oh, we have a call center. Let's train people to answer the phone. And then for a long time, that was the way to bring jobs to, when I was a reporter in New Mexico, constantly. We got a new call center. Great. But what are you making? But like you said, it's space, it's green energy, it's those types of things. Would you like to? You would obviously like to see some of that come back to Ohio. You would love to see those plants or those jobs or that tech, right?
Right. Well, I mean, look, I talked to businessmen from. I've talked to a lot of people who made businesses here in the United States as well as Ohio. And they are from abroad, and they said there's no better place to do business and create a company than here in the United States. So if given the choice, and if we are welcoming to those businesses and we protect the ability for them to try new things, possibly fail and innovate, they're going to want to do things here. Yeah. Right. But also, we also have to look at the incentives of other countries and if they are playing fair. And I think we do have to compete against China in a way of being a little more aggressive, or at least incentivizing Americans to do, or companies to do things in America. For example, One of the biggest things that I realized, living in China, is that we were always second-class citizens. I was always a foreigner. I would never be a Chinese person. I never be a Chinese national. I never be able to, conduct business there and buy real estate and have rentals. And it just isn't there for me. I'm not allowed to. And if I was married to a Chinese national, the stuff would have to be in her name, right? So it's just not fair. I remember when I got to Beijing in like 2005, they had an import luxury tax for like BMWs and different kind of cars that were made abroad because they weren't made in China. You know what? In a couple of years, you saw BMWs made in China. You saw GM and Ford and Volkswagen, and they made them in China to cut those import taxes. They employed a hell of a lot of people. That was a government incentive to do that. Right. So if they're going to do that for their people to make these jobs, we have to do the same. And so and I could tell you, like, we can absolutely do that. We just got to start thinking that way.
Well, how do you do that? Because didn't we at one point we were looking at, what was it, champagne and liquor, and the Trump administration was doing that with certain things, and it didn't go well. Because there's certain things you can't make in the United States. We've tried. We have the trade zones where you can come in, and we throw tax incentives if you'll assemble things here, parts from other countries. Is it expanding that? Is it pick and choose? Is it being very select about what things we try to bring here?
Look, you have to be careful with that. So what Trump did is tax and put real big tariffs on existing markets. And that only hurt people of those markets. For example, that hurt farmers a lot, because a lot of like Ohio's farmers, corn and soybeans, were going different places. And so if China needed their soybeans, and now they're going to be like, well, if you're taxing us, we're going to tax your soybeans. That hurt Ohio farmers. That was an already established trade, right? Let's take a look at the Inflation Reduction Act and their incentives for, say, buying EVs. I would argue that the $7,500 for incentives for people to buy EVs is not there for the consumer. It is actually there for onshoring our supply chain because of the things that are in the bill. For example, at the start of the bill, it has to be like, and don't quote me on this, but it has to be like the car has to be manufactured in the U.S. and 50% of components have to be in the U.S. U.S. made, and 50% of the battery components have to be U.S. made. And then moving up in a couple of years, by 5 years or 10 years of this, 100% of the battery has to be produced in the United States, and 100% of the materials have to be produced in the United States, and 100% of the manufacturing has to be done in the United States for the car. People think that they're getting $7,500 off the car, which I don't think that is actually, I don't think you need that in this market. You don't need to give $7,500 incentives for people to buy an EV. They're flying off the shelves. But what is being the incentive for is incentivizing the companies to onshore that supply chain, to onshore those minerals, to onshore all of that industry. So therefore, we are breaking our dependence on foreign made and foreign oil. And this is a good way. So you're not disrupting current established trade routes and markets. You're actually creating a new one. And so if we can try to think about, and I don't know if this is going to work, this seems like this is going to be a 10-year project, but if we can start thinking about that for other industries, biotech and different energy sources, yada, yada, even maybe new kinds of, farming and so on and so forth, you're going to see industries pop up all over the place. And then you're going to fuel the construction workers, the engineers, the electricians, the plumbers, the, small business owners, just have the restaurants and bars and so on and so forth. You're going to have economies spring up all around these different things. I mean, I can't wait to see what New Albany outside of Columbus, the new Intel plant, what that community is going to look like when it comes to tax revenue and shops and bars and restaurants and, movie theaters and stuff like that. It's going to be amazing what they do over there.
So what do you say to it? What do you say to a constituent then? Because, it seems so fragmented sometimes, because you're looking at it and you're like, okay, well, we're going to get EV cars. We're going to get to a point where that's going to help the environment. There's going to be more on the road. We're going to get the infrastructure going, more than just potholes. It's going to be the power grid and the infrastructure and bridges and all of that. And people are trying to pay the rent, and we can't get houses. And like, there's so many pieces of it. What do you say to the single mother with the two kids who's just trying to keep food on the table, or the elderly couple that's trying to get, their prescriptions filled or whatever, and there's just so many problems coming at them?
Right. So we were talking about more macro, general kind of ideas for the U.S. and the state. But there definitely needs to be, look, first of all, people are taxed too much. I think middle class should just have way lower taxes. For first and foremost, I think that there should be relief because of this inflation right now in forms of tax credits. Because hey, it's hard. Mm-hmm. It is really hard. But I think that we have to put the mom and pop story into the bigger story as well, and allow them to understand that, one, their vote matters. Getting out to vote and voting for the right people is very important, to make sure that that person is not just looking at the now, but also looking at the future. So when your kid and your mom, you're raising your kids, or your dad, you're raising your kids, is looking at what those kids are going to do in the future. Are we going to have those jobs? Do they have different paths if it's just not four-year college, or you do trade schools or vocational schools? And this is what you want people to get into office to advocate for. And so I'm running for office for both. We have to figure out how to make sure people are helped in the now. The fact that we didn't pass a bill to cap insulin $35 all across the board, and only did it for Medicare, is absolutely ridiculous. It's immoral, right? We have to get stuff like that done for people now. However, we also have to elect people that are thinking long term. So I'm trying to bring in both to that. Yeah, and that's what I would tell them.
Yeah, and your jobs, I mean, being a representative is, from the creation, it's much more about the people in your community. I mean, it's much more, yes, it's about Ohio in general, but it's more about, just by the way that Congress was created, it's about you understanding the people that you are out talking to, shaking hands with, listening to their problems, which kind of brings me to something else I wanted to chat with you about. Is, what do you like about running? Like, this is more, I want to learn more about the man here. So what do you enjoy about the process? Because I worked as a campaign manager, so I understand the stresses, and I understand all of the things that you have to do that unfortunately aren't the most fun. But what do you enjoy about this process of being out there with the people and getting your message out, and the day-to-day activity?
There's two things I really like about it. The first of all is going out to the people. Straight up, going out to talk to people, meeting people, getting to know me, getting to know, I think that's the fun part.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's always been fun, because again, talking about the bar and leaving your baggage at the bar, I've been talking to, Republicans and Democrats and independents and unaffiliated and progressives and conservatives and libertarians and, all these different people. And, I just generally believe that most of us agree on the majority.
Yeah.
And so once we cut out the fat of this one single issue, and if you're not a single issue voter, then you just cut that out and say, this is what we totally agree on. And these little bits right here, we're going to have to have some beers over and figure that out. Right. And that's totally okay. So that's what I like about it. The other thing I really like about it is I'm looking at politics under the hood, and I don't think a lot of people get to know that. And we have a complete screwed up system, a broken ass system that is absolutely effed. Can we cuss on your show? I'm not too sure.
Hell yeah, do it.
All right. The system's fucked.
Yeah.
The two-party system, the amount of money that is coming in here, and it's completely fucked.
Yeah.
And I think that anybody that tells you that there is not, that this is not money influenced and controlled and power controlled, would not be honest. If I'm talking about from a candidate's point of view, the parties are super strong. Where they put their money is super important. Calling a little fact for your listeners.
Yeah.
Did you know in 2020? The whole cycle for 2020 took in $14.4 billion. Do you know that the MLB and the NBA make around $6.5 billion a piece? So that means that politics in one election year makes more money than the entire Major League Baseball and National Basketball Association. And I'm not just talking about those structures. I'm talking about every team in it. The Cavs, the Bulls, the Lakers, the Cleveland Guardians, the Yankees, all of them put together is this political structure has more money. It's more money than the NFL. And I'm not talking about
an entire industry.
It's an entire industry, man.
Consultants.
Yeah. Bro, it's insane. And so when people say that, well, you know, this is democracy, you after looking on the hood, you kind of go like, you know how important that one vote is. That's first of all. The one vote has much more importance to me now than it did before, because I understand how important it is to get people out to vote and people to care. But I also understand how screwed up this whole finance thing in this whole political thing to influence these voters is. And that needs to change, man.
Do you think we should, like other countries have shorter election cycles? I think I want to say South Korea, it's like a month or 2 months. That's it. I mean, we have a 2-year campaign at this point, basically. And you as a representative, the moment you say that oath, you're basically raising money for the next cycle. It's you get to go out and have a beer at the bar, leave your baggage, and then the next day you're out asking for money. Because you've only it's every 2 years. It's not
like, man, come on, like how like you have to feel the same way as me. I think it's such a hypocrisy for candidates to go there. We're talking to average people and we're saying like, we're going to make your life better. We're going to try to advocate for you. And at the same time, we're asking them for their last $25 and we're raising millions of dollars and we're putting millions of dollars into campaign ads. That millions of dollars could have helped so many people with student loan debt or mortgage payments and so on and so forth. It is such a hypocrisy. It makes you sick, man.
Hallelujah.
It makes you sick. I don't know if it makes you feel that way, but sure as hell makes me feel that way. I am grateful for every person that opens up their pockets, but we shouldn't have to have you open up your pocket, man.
Yeah,
like it's absolutely disgusting. And what we do, we turn it right around and put it to some consultant firm that overcharge you on ads and overcharge you to make videos and overcharges everything and corners the market. And if you don't, and it's pay to play. One thing I don't think anybody really understands that everything is pay to play. You don't have the money, you don't get the party support. You don't have the money, you don't get media support. You don't have the money, you're not going to be on the news. Like it's all money based. And then you're stuck with this candidate with the most money, and they say that now it's your choice, which is a little bit of a fallacy because the choice has been made by who has the most money. Yeah. Now, we obviously are not raising as much money as Max Miller. There's no way. It's impossible. The only thing I can do is say, look, tell you who I am, tell you to get out the vote, say that this is a winnable district. It's a R+5. It's a winnable district. We need you to go out and vote and be an authentic person. Talk about the right things. And if I'm talking about the right things and being authentic and telling you what's under the hood, not just closing the hood when you come up, but look under the hood, see what's there. Yeah. You know, and I think that we can pull this off, and we just need more people to do that.
A friend of mine, I told him you were coming on the show. He's a historian, and he sent me an email that was about this long. He went and he dove into your and he's like, here's my advice. But one thing he brought up I thought was interesting, and we touched on a little bit, is about an eye toward the future, about bringing together unity. He also brought up some points. He's like, Ohio is a great state. It has amazing people who have done amazing things who have come out of there. And that's the platform, is look with an eye to the future and really saying, look, we can come together and we can do amazing things again. That seems kind of like where you're going, because you want to go out and every single person in your district shake their hand and be like, look, I don't care. Red, blue, purple, we're in this together. How can we make tomorrow a brighter place?
I love it. And lift people up.
Yeah.
And make sure we have pensions, and make sure that people can retire with dignity, and make sure that, you know, you can get new dentures when you're retired.
Well, hearing aids are covered now. Hearing aids
are
covered.
Are. Oh, that's perfect.
A huge thing.
Oh, finally, man. Good.
I'll send you Stacy's resume. You could hire him as a consultant, because we all know it's part of the machine. But so
I don't hire any consultants. We're a small, scrappy startup. Look, we're running this campaign. And I'm very proud of how our campaign was. Yeah. When we first started, I was listening to the consultants, and we had this top-down little hierarchical structure. We had a campaign manager and that, and director, and this person, the media person, the comms person. And it was like, first of all, it was super expensive. Mm-hmm. It was super slow. It was super bureaucratic. We have a small team. We have a couple group chats. We are all together. Any problems we have, we talk to each other. Any ideas that we have, we put them in there. Any solutions that we make them together, and we get together, and we just are basically a small, scrappy startup, you know, grassroots, just getting the job done. I want to run my office like that in Washington too. I don't want to have the chief of staff and then the deputy chief of staff, and everybody has this hierarchical stuff, which a lot of people are already asking for the job. They're like, yeah, I'm going to be your right hand man. No. we're all the right hand man, and I'm going to be the person that's going to be cleaning the office too. So I like this is what we have to do. We have to change the mentality of how this is going to work.
Yeah. What are people coming to you with? What are the people of the district? I mean, what are the issues that they're facing? What are you hearing? I'm really curious, because every state is a little different, but as Americans, we all have some of the similar issues. What are they, when you sit down with them at that pancake breakfast, or when you sit with them at that speech, or wherever you're making, I know how their appearances go, what are they saying to you? What are the kitchen table issues that they want to talk to you about?
It depends on who it is, obviously. Yeah. But I think there's two, maybe three themes that everybody says. Roe, the Dobbs decision. Mm-hmm. Nobody's happy about this. Republicans, Independents, Democrats, nobody's happy about this. Women are appalled, and that's across the political spectrum. Mm-hmm. That is the number one thing out of everybody's mouth. Grandfathers, fathers, mothers, grandmothers even most, like they get livid because they're like, I was alive in 1973, and now we're here, So that's number one. Number two is unity, and that is actually a bigger theme than I thought it would be, because I thought I was like my own self. Like they're like, yeah, I'm really sick of division. I'm really sick of the way that politics is happening right now. People are just getting apathetic because they're just sick of the total fringes just throwing shit back and forth to each other. It's really turning people off. And so those are the two biggest that I hear. Those are the two biggest I hear for this district, to be honest with you.
So, okay. So how does it all end? How do we, that's a question that my friend gives me all the time. And he always says, we always need to look as a historian, how does this end? So what is the path that you see us heading toward if we can't get this unity? And what's the path when we get this unity? There's two possible paths that we're heading on. What's the worst case scenario that you see, that you want to avoid, that you want this country to avoid? Without getting negative. I'm not trying to get all negative or anything, but it's,
I want to say that I want to say that I don't like the question, because it puts a definite future.
Okay.
And the definite future, predicting the future is absolutely impossible. And like I was just thinking the other day, is like, if I told somebody to run, what would I tell them? Like one of my biggest advice would be, I would say, just keep going, because you never know what the next day is going to bring. And that's just true in life. But with campaigns, and I know since you were a campaign manager, you might think that all is lost. And then one day you get a great funding raising day, or somebody gives you a call and you get a great endorsement, and that changes the ball game, right? And so to try to predict the future of anything is very hard. What I will say is the two choices that you said that we have, I think are this. One, an optimistic, let's get shit done, look to the future of making sure that there's prosperity for everyone while protecting everyone's individual rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think that is one frame. Mm-hmm. The other frame is to start restricting different things and rights and piecemealing that and figuring out how that's going to make America look in the future. And that's going to change the way that America looks. Mm-hmm. And so I think those are the two choices. How they're going to figure themselves out in the future, I'm not too sure. But I'm going to definitely be the one that tries to fight for the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and making a positive impact for America into the late 21st and 22nd century.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And how that's going to work out in the future,
I don't like your question.
Well,
it makes sense, though. It makes. I'm not trying to be negative.
But that's the thing.
It's that whole thing. It's like, okay, look, we're on this path, and as adult, I think sometimes we don't have political conversations as adults. And I think sometimes it's this kind of Pollyanna-ish, like, everything's going to be okay. It's like, no. If I drive off this cliff, my car is going to go to the bottom of a canyon. And I think sometimes as adults, we all kind of just need to have that conversation and be kind of like, this is what I think is going to happen, and this is why it's important to me. but it totally makes sense what you're saying. You know, it's about unity and bringing it together, and let's like give everybody their rights and come together.
Look, so I was interviewed by a political reporter about a year and a half ago, and he said I'm too thoughtful to be a politician. That's what he said, and I take it's a negative and a compliment at the same time. And so this is why I'm going to say that why I didn't like that is because we do operate in a lot of black and whites, and we need to operate in a lot more grays.
Okay.
So what can we say about certain things? Do I think our democracy is under threat? 100%. I 100% think that. Do I think that if given the chance, Donald Trump will try to infringe on that again and try to do the same January 6th thing again and probably understand how to do it better? 100%. 100%. Do I understand how things are going to, if we can't figure out how to codify Roe on a federal level, what does America look like when we have these different laws in states, especially in Ohio, when we have a 6-week abortion ban and no, leeway for rape or incest? What does that look like if more and more states roll that out? I don't know. Does that make a lot of people move from those states and leave these places barren and just maybe a certain ideology? And does that actually affect their economy and their ability to bring jobs? Or do certain, jobs and economies form within those that are just formed around that kind of ideology? And then do we have like different wars and trade wars? We can't because of interstate commerce, but within these different states, I don't know what the future looks like. All I know is that there's one that I don't want to try, and there's one I do want to try.
Do you think that those people who say that the elections this November are a referendum on Biden and there are chances to answer back, do you agree with that? Because I don't think you do, from what I'm hearing from you.
I don't think Biden is relevant in this conversation. I think that the people have to understand how they want their state, their districts, and their country to look. And Biden is one part of this whole thing. I don't think that I think that what we really need to do is look at this the representation and what people are saying across the spectrum and vote for the people that are going to be the more moderate, that are going to try to unify people and try to bring, a more positive, collaborative future. We see what division's doing.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with Biden. And I think that people I think people need to either, if they don't understand that, they need to understand that. And I think that people do actually understand that it's not actually about Biden. This is about the whole and the soul of America.
Well said. One last question.
Yes, sir.
I was on your Twitter feed and I saw you post NASA images. Are you a space nut? Are you fascinated by all this stuff?
I'm a hardcore sci-fi nut and a Trekkie.
Oh, really? Hardcore sci-fi. Bring it on.
Hardcore sci-fi, hardcore Trekkie, STNG, Deep Space Nine, all day.
I'm more of a Stargate guy, but like I'll give you props.
All right, I never watched the show, but the original movie was good. But never watched the show. I'm more of a let's say here, Battlestar or The Expanse kind of guy.
Oh, okay. Battlestar was the classic or the reimagined
the remake one.
Oh, okay.
That was just that was excellent TV. Excellent TV.
What is it you like about sci-fi? What is it is it the adventure, the science,
I think it's all of it. It's the adventure, the science.
You got the biggest smile right now when you said that.
Well, it's just it's the adventure. It's like I think one of my disappointments, like with life in general, and this might sound kind of dark, is that we aren't working to explore all of that or to find like the truths of a lot of different things. Yeah. Like the human being is such a powerful thing if we work together, and like when I look at like sci-fi, I think of like, hey, could we be doing this now if we were all just like working together in more of a collaborative fashion, more toward mutual goals instead of like fighting with each other, fighting for power, fighting for politics, fighting for nation states and so on and so forth. And so I look at that as like the further human achievement. And I wish that I was part of that, And so that's why I kind of like it. And that's why I like Star Trek so much, is because if people don't know Star Trek set into like this utopian Earth where we kind of don't look at race and nation and money. We're looking for the betterment of humanity and how to get that done. And within Star Trek, you cross these different alien races that have these different aspects of humanity, and you have to learn how to deal with those. If it's the aggression of the Klingon, if it's like the cunning, conniving Romulan, if it's the money-hungry Ferengi, you have to learn how to deal with those. And that's our humanity that Star Trek's trying to go through, but looking through the lens of somebody who's already figured it out.
Yeah.
And so that's what I really like about that, is it's like trying to cut away a lot of the noise and just look at some of these real deep human issues. And yeah, I think it's a lot of fun.
Do you think we need to turn more energy and finances toward exploration and toward getting off the planet?
Not getting off the planet. I don't think. I think I think we have to open it up to more private industry and allow them to try to explore that themselves. And I think that Elon has shown that, you like him or hate him, he has shown that he can do it very efficiently and very cost effectively. And I think we need to start opening it up and say, hey guys, go for it. You know,
that's the open market.
That is the explorers of, those guys are the explorers of, you know, the oceans of the past.
Yeah.
And we can't be afraid of exploring. We can't be afraid of failure. We can't blame and point fingers and wag the finger at failure. We have to open it up. And I think that I don't think that the people can stomach putting a lot of money into that when there's a lot of stuff to fix on the ground. And I understand that. But if somebody can, you know, come up and raise money and be an entrepreneur and create the first space hotel or trips to Mars and even beyond, then we should very much encourage that.
Yeah. Remember when we were kids and it was like, we'd have jetpacks and you go back and watch this old sci-fi. It's like, by 1999, we'll have cities on the moon.
Well, I mean, I'm very upset about no jetpacks, flying cars, or cities on the moon. I wish we did, but I think that we have accomplished quite a bit that we didn't think we were gonna. Yeah. I mean, the fact that me and you, and this is an audio only, are sitting here in real time looking at each other on Zoom, talking back and forth to each other with no audio cut out, and you're recording this to put online so it's a decentralized form so everybody can listen to it whenever they want, is pretty damn amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I lied. One last question, then I'm gonna let you go.
No worries. I'm actually free for the next while, so man, we can just keep going, man. I'm okay.
Well, usually it's a soundbite. Usually it's like you get 5 minutes to like on the news or something. So that's why I love this format, because like we can sit here and talk Star Trek. You bring up Zoom and you bring up this new reality that we're in. So let's talk about that for a second. How do you see people adjusting? How are you adjusting? How is Ohio adjusting to this new reality coming out of COVID? I mean, we have a new remote world. We have a lot of new ways of looking at the world. Some people are afraid of even talking to other people still. I'm here in California, like we're still dealing with mask mandates. We're still dealing with other issues. Some of the schools are fighting it right now, whether or not they're going to do testing. How do we deal with this brave new world of all of this?
Well, I'm gonna totally not answer your question and redirect your question like a good politician, and actually, because you bring up the technology aspect of it, and I think the biggest thing that we have to look at right now when it comes to technology in general is privacy and your data privacy. You being a campaign manager, I know you used Vote Builder. Mm-hmm. And I know you looked at people and how they score people and different ideologies and how to camp them and put them together. And just really quick for your listeners, I don't know if you've spoken about this on the show before. So there's something that candidates and campaigns can buy from your state parties, and it has all your information on it, which I think is totally bizarre and crazy, should be illegal. Mm-hmm. And so what we do is we download your voter data, and then it's not how you vote, but it's what they do is they put you in a DNR category. Because you probably vote in a primary or grab a certain primary ballot. And then what they do is they use data brokers to figure out who you are as a person. And with those data brokers, they look at your purchases, your watches and stuff like that. If it's on Netflix or YouTube, or if you're buying stuff with your Visa and where you go and where you travel and kind of car you buy and stuff like that. And then they make a profile on you. And they put you in a category like, oh, this is a solid Democrat. Or is it a Democrat that could lean Republican? Or is it a Republican that could lean Democrat and stuff like that? And that's all because they know how to mine and your data, and your data's bought and sold by all these companies. And this is off Facebook and so on and so forth. Like what pages you visit, how much you're on there, yada, yada. All of this is recorded. And so what they're doing is they're building a profile for you for political campaigns. I mean, obviously, car companies buy their own data that they want for their user base. So does, Netflix and YouTube. But political campaigns do that as well. And so I think the biggest thing that we have to look at right now is try to figure out how to control that, how to put the privacy back into the person's hands, how the person control that data, and make sure that we are protecting, which I think is a fundamental human right to privacy.
How do you do that, though? The genie's out of the bottle at this point. I mean, the internet was built on the fact that we said, I would rather give up my data than have to pay for these services, in a nutshell. How do you go back from that? It's only one step from where we are to a social credit score, and then suddenly you can't buy a house because you didn't do the right things. That's a fear of many people on both sides of the aisle.
Well, I think that it's just controlling your identity, and I think that's a big thing. And so this is going to be another little rant for a minute. So give me a second. I have to explain this to your listeners. Bring it. No. So first, let's talk about what identity is. And I wish that this was an original thought. This is somebody that I was talking to about this as well.
Yeah.
But a lot of times when you say your identity, what you do is you think about your ID, your birth date, your social security number, and where you live. And that's what's on your driver's license. And they're like, oh, that's my ID. But that's not true. What is identity? Your identity is everything you are. And when you talk to different people, you give them access to different permissions of your identity. If you say you have a spouse, husband and wife, they have access and more access than most people to who you are, your identity. And that's usually why you get mad at your spouse when they say something that they shouldn't about your personal identity to other people. Like, you're not supposed to tell them that, right? You get upset because that was something that you just gave them permission, right? Me and you have permissions right now. I'm allowing you to know certain things about me, and I'm not blurting out other things about me, right? Because some of them will probably be inappropriate. Right. It doesn't fit the format of this show, right? And the same thing with your bartender and the person at the door in the club, or maybe just people at work around the water cooler. Everybody has an amount of identity that they permission to other people. What we have to do is we have to have a good understanding of what identity is. And I think this is from a federal level, and understand how we allow people to permission said identity to these companies. And by permissioning these data, these different parts of identity to these companies, either they can sell said data, and maybe get some of that revenue back to them, create like more of an exchange of commerce if it's either free use of the product, or getting actually paid for the data, or they have the ability to just stop the data or permission pieces of that data. Mm-hmm. And I think that when we say the genie's out of the bottle, the genie isn't out of the bottle because the fact is nobody ever gave them this permission. Nobody gave Facebook the permission. They said, oh, well, you can, log in and you use the data so I can use the service. But nobody said that they're looking at exactly what ads you look at, how long you look at them, what groups you belong to, and create a profile so that they can sell stuff to you. And they know probably more about your personality than most people do. And then they give that data to the companies and governments and campaigns and so on and so forth. Nobody agreed to that.
Yeah. But is that a legal issue?
That is,
or is it a personal issue? Do we decide as people not to do it, or does the government need to step in and say, look, let's parse this out and figure out what's legal, what's not, where the line is?
I personally think that the government needs to make a standard. Now, I'm not saying that the government comes in and controls things. Again, when it comes to controlling regulation, I don't think that's appropriate in any market. Mm-hmm. But I think that it's kind of like, I think that there needs to be a standard of care for your data. And this is not just saying that, create arbitrary rules. We're talking about protection of privacy. Mm-hmm. And I think that there has to be a standard. And then once you make a standard, then people I think the companies has to move and merge into said standard.
Sort of a court of public opinion kind of thing. Sort of like, we decide as a society, we're not going to take, we're not going to take this anymore.
Exactly. And you know what? I want there to be a discussion with tech companies about that, and the people about that, and stuff, and so on and so forth. But I can tell you right now that the vast majority, I can't tell you one person I've ever asked that says, yeah, the amount of information that these companies got on me, the way that they use this data, is something I signed up for because I want to get free Facebook. We have never signed up for that. And the thing is not that. It's nobody knew what the power was. And until Cambridge Analytica and that whole thing, and then some of the revelations with Facebook and Instagram, and just me telling you and your listeners about how people are making political profiles about you so they can target you and use persuasion, nobody signed up for that. And so we didn't know how this was going to be abused, but now we have to really chop the head off that snake, and then make sure that we don't want to hurt the industries. We don't want to hurt these businesses. We don't want to hurt these companies. We don't want to hurt jobs. But transition to something where, again, just like I said about ID, you're allowed to permission your ID in certain ways that is acceptable for these different platforms. And there has to be a way to use that information that is ethical, because this is not ethical.
So how do you have a national discussion on that when the discussion platforms that we have now are those exact platforms? Like, you go on Twitter, and Twitter's a screaming match between people. The algorithms on Facebook only show you people that agree with you. And then, I don't know if you were familiar with the story a few weeks ago. I mean, Instagram comes out and says, we're going to start showing you things that are different to expand your reach. And everybody rebelled. And they said, no, I only want to see the things that are in my circle. Careful what you wish for. I mean, how do you have those national discussions? You can't go out and, sit down and have a beer with every person in America. Could be fun, but you can't.
I'll try it. I'll definitely try it.
Where
are you in California, by the way?
LA.
Oh, okay. I lived in San Diego for 6 months. So
okay.
Good beer over there.
But how do you have a national discussion anymore?
I think that it is. Look, I think it goes back to electing the right people. I doubt anybody else that's on the campaign trails, besides maybe a few people, are discussing the things that we're discussing on the show. And that's not just giving you political talking points and sticking to the script and have half hour and get the hell out of here. But it's about electing those people that want to have the intellectual curiosity, that want to have these discussions. And then once you get that representative that goes to Washington, it's that initiative in Washington. That's an initiative to Washington to call up the CEOs to see how we can start this and if it's a good idea. It's about lighting that fire under your colleagues in Washington, and then having it trickle down from there. I think it's just hiring the right people that are already thinking about this sort of thing. And that's the only thing. To say to blast it out on Twitter and then try to get some kind of consensus out of that won't work. But for multiple reasons. One,
there's always Truth Social.
Just stop. Stop. But people,
gotcha.
But people are always going to want to have privacy and the ability to have privacy. And I think we just start with there. And I think that everybody would say that this is ballooned out a way that's grossly out of the things that we signed up for. But if you guys like privacy and your privacy and your controlling your ID, your identification, elect me to office. We'll have those conversations.
There you go. So go ahead and I'll take a second right now. If anybody wants to check out your campaign, obviously if they're in Ohio, your website is
DiemerForCongress.com. That's DIEMER for Congress.com.
All right. And the links are in the show notes, as well as I'll put your social media links in there and everything.
Put Act Blue there too. Still got to ask for people for money.
There you go. I clicked on to look at your stuff. First thing comes up is like, you got to donate. And I'm like, maybe later. But
super hit. Again, the hypocrisy. Go back to later in the show. I hate it.
It's part of the beast, man. You gotta pay to play, unfortunately. But maybe you'll change that. Let's see what you can do. You got a long career.
I hope we can change that.
Oh, well played.
Support comes from the History's Train Wrecks podcast that focuses on stories like a temper tantrum that changed history, the president who promised not to run again and regretted it for the rest of his life, the World War II general who lost his pants on a secret mission in enemy territory. The History's Train Wrecks podcast, available now.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Your support means everything. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share the show. Check out my Substack. The links are in the show notes, and I'll see you next time on The Open Highway.
for the highways of America, which for so many years were an assortment of as many designs and pavements as there were states, are now becoming one big road that can take you anywhere faster, safer, and more directly than ever before. What is this big road? Where is it going? How much has been built? How much is yet to come? These are questions we ask. Certainly traveling the entire system would be a memorable experience, but few of us have the time for such a trip.